There was a bit of brightness to the markets this week. When you look at the news events, we all saw that Trump said a deal was very close to being signed, but he's also said that 30 other times prior. What made it different this time was Pakistan confirmed that particular news event as well. But when is it going to be signed, whether it's this particular weekend or in the future, that is still up for debate. Within the same week, we had SpaceX surge through a $2 trillion IPO, causing a lot of celebration in the stock markets. SPX was showing some strength. Oil has dropped a lot this week. And at the same time, risk assets such as Bitcoin and Ethereum are breaking out of prior resistance levels to form new supports. So is this the change to a new risk-on trend, or are we still in caution mode? All of that we'll discuss in this week's video. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Strategic Markets, your place for technical and fundamental analysis all at once. Now, into our end of week session, we are starting off with the America-Iran war updates. Basically, Trump says the deal is about to be signed today, while Israel has hit South Beirut again. This is where things get interesting because recently, if you've gone on X, you have seen a lot of news. A deal is going ahead, and there's a lot particularly happening. Each particular 5-10 minutes, new events are coming out. But the truth of the matter is, and as I said earlier on this particular video, there was a news where Pakistan, which is the negotiator and the middleman in all of this, their prime minister had come out and said that a final deal is done. And when you cycle through some other things, Trump has said, look, the Hormuz Strait will be open as soon as this memorandum of peace is signed. But on that aspect, Qatar's negotiators flew to Tehran Sunday morning in effort to finalize the deal to end the US-Iran conflict. So a lot of Middle Eastern assets are currently involved to get this matter resolved as soon as possible. And all these news events are kind of happening all at once. But it is looking like there's more confidence in the market right now, more than ever, that there could be a peace deal happening between America versus Iran. What is that doing for relevant assets? Well, Brent crude, which we have been discussing for quite a long time right now, if you see on the daily, it's actually playing out beautifully to this particular pattern, but to the ascending wedge, it's breaking down. And recently, I've basically drawn this Fibonacci from the low of this period to the high of our recent period. And I figured out, okay, from a Fibonacci perspective, if we break down on the daily for $89, which hasn't confirmed yet, but if we do break down from here and do confirm it, then next targets we're going towards is the $82 aspect, which is in line with our 200-day SMA. So if we keep getting this positive news and further progression, it is highly likely that, yes, the price of oil does drop from here onwards. So be on the lookout for that as soon as this confirms on the daily or even the weekly over here. On other news, we also had SpaceX's IPO that went through, and it had a $2 trillion pass in the IPO session. And that was basically closing in on Amazon's market cap as well. And on that as well, Elon Musk has become the world's first trillionaire. So, man, that's a lot of money for, one person to have, but obviously he's the first person to do it. Good on him for him to be capable to do so. But yeah, for me personally, I'm completely out of the SpaceX trade. I don't want anything to do with it because when you look at the data for tech stocks and especially successful IPOs, within the first 6 months, a lot of them correct about 50%. And it's just not something I would want to risk. It's doing great right now. And I get that it gets a listing into the S&P 500 within 15 days from trading. And that means, most of your S&P 500 investors are going to be adding towards SpaceX, but still, you'll have your individual traders or people who hold that particular asset. Early investors, how they choose to get rid of it, that could be taking into effect for the next 6 months, and that's why I'm happy to be out of the markets for SpaceX. But when we talk about the S&P 500, you can see over here that after the IPO, the S&P 500 and with the news of the America-Iran tensions slowly resolving, the S&P 500 was starting to make a move back up. So it's going to likely test the 20-day SMA over the next upcoming week, and we'll just see over here if the market does decide to change direction. But that all will be confirmed over the next couple of days. On more risk assets, this is actually fairly good for Bitcoin because Bitcoin on the 4-hourly time frame, we had been making this a little bit of a W pattern, but you can see over here we were having strong resistance at the 63,800 level. We just broke past it within this particular day. So that was fairly positive news on the 4 hourly aspect. And then if you look on the daily chart over here, especially on the MACD as well, you would see that we have crossed over here, making a MACD cross. And even though our price levels are currently lower, our MACD has flipped higher. So in the last couple of sessions, we were at 62K. In this session, we went down to 60K. But our MACD is basically stronger than what it was on the daily prior, and it's actually flipped bullish now. So this is confirming a bit of a MACD divergence, and that is to say that the next couple of days could be a bit of positive action as long as the geopolitical events, continue to confirm the news that's happening right now. We could be seeing a bit more relief in the price of Bitcoin, possibly touching this 20-day SMA at the 66,000 level, but we'll just have to see that play out over the next couple of days. Another thing that could be adding to Bitcoin's price action moving upwards is a lot of people within the Senate are getting fairly bullish and optimistic that the Clarity Act will pass by July 4th. So that's Patrick Witt, who is one of the people in the Senate pushing for the Clarity Act to go through by July 4th. But then you have journalists such as Eleanor Terrett who are going out and saying that the Clarity Act cannot pass by July 4th. It's basically logistically impossible, which is a fairly strong statement to make.
Very
Saying
strong.
yes, very strong. And with that being said, they're saying that, it's very likely it goes till August or doesn't pass through in this particular year. But things are becoming fairly scary regarding this. But there is belief that this might get pushed through, which is also one of the reasons why the price could be rallying. And any news that comes out of that or any date that's set in the Senate, I have been hearing some rumors that the White House is doing closed room meetings to discuss and progress this matter further. So we'll just have to see how that particularly goes. But right now, yeah, these are your two competing arguments as to when it gets pushed through by the 4th of July or way past that. On risk assets, Ethereum has also, similar to Bitcoin, found support around this particular area and has that confirmed MACD divergence. You can see the price went lower. I'll just draw it out in this particular thing. This particular line, the price actually went lower from 1800 to 1553, but the MACD divergence is again gone from lower to higher. So in that particular case, we are flipping bullish again, and Ethereum could be seeing some bullish price action for the next couple of days, but we just monitor that and see how that comes along. Altcoins, on the other hand, similar story on the monthly. We are in this long-term monthly downtrend, which has been going on for 53 months. That's nearly about a 4.5 year cycle that altcoins have just been dragging down. But just very recently, they're breaking out of this downward strength, not with a lot of strength just about yet, but it did show a little bit early on in this particular month. But right now, they've retraced a little bit back. As altcoins continue to find strength with Bitcoin, this could be very good and this could be very relevant for risk asset holders. If Clarity Act also comes into play, you can really expect to see a bit of a breakout over here as long as other geopolitical events are good as well. So there is a lot of things happening in the market right now, but I would just have to say, there is a little bit of brightness forming over here for most of the equities markets due to recent geopolitical events and such IPOs and different legislations passing through possibly. But on that, I will pass it off to Steve for his technical analysis.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Yash. And it's great to be back. Thank you so much for holding fort whilst I was gone for personal reasons during the week, and a terrific job during the week as well, and also for this particular presentation. Now, let's have a look at Bitcoin starting off with. And as you can see, well, you've just covered things beautifully as always. And MACD divergence, like you were mentioning a few moments ago, being reflected also in relation to these particular charts, as you can see. We've actually got the share price or the unit price for Bitcoin starting to really come back from these support lines back from March 2021 and also April 2021, and coming back as well now, taking a look through these short-term moving averages, we're actually now coming between both of those and potentially coming back up towards the other resistance line from October 2021 as well. Interestingly, when we flip across to the left-hand side chart where the Ichimoku curve is, we're starting to form higher highs and higher lows with a lagging indicator as well. So there definitely is some strength coming back into Bitcoin as well now as well, unless all of a sudden we start actually flipping beneath these support lines here from back in 2021 again. So it looks as though we're starting to form those higher highs in the unit price and starting to form that base. So let's see whether or not that actually continues to actually hammer out that base and actually start moving upwards now above these short-term moving averages. Now, are we out of the woods yet, though, when it comes to Bitcoin? Well, we've got the foundations. Everything that Yash was basically mentioning before is starting to actually form a good narrative overall. You've got the altcoins starting to actually provide some support. You've got all of this base forming in relation to Bitcoin as well. Everything's starting to look like everything's forming that nice foundation. Even Ethereum's starting to actually get there in terms of bringing things upwards as well too. But in terms of Ethereum, we've still got that little bit of an anchor dragging things backwards. We're not really getting over this lagging indicator here on the left-hand side in terms of that previous high. As you can see, we've got these highs starting to form here with the lagging indicator, but they're not breaching that former high back over here in terms of probably about mid-May. It's still a little bit more room to move in relation to all of that. We haven't really breached any of these former highs over here, and we've still got a long way to go before we really start getting back above this resistance area back here from April 2025. So a little bit more to go, and you can really see here as well that we're still below both of the short-term moving averages in terms of the 8-day EMA being the yellow line and the 15-day EMA being that cyan line, and they're both still pointing downwards. So a little bit of pressure here still in the short term, especially in terms of Ethereum. So until we start getting that moving around, we really can't say with really great certainty that the cryptos are still really out of trouble at this point. But things are starting to potentially turn around, especially from the Bitcoin and perhaps the altcoin area as well, in terms of that potential breakout past that multi-month resistance area that we were talking about before from Yash. So put everything into perspective there in terms of getting the big clear picture. How everything looking on the indices perspective, especially with that SpaceX move that was going on? Well, overall, the biggest area to really look at is the Dow. The Dow was probably one of the areas that was actually showing a bit of extra strength. That actually has bounced up above short-term moving averages here towards the end of the week. It had actually come back down below all these short-term moving averages, but actually retraced back nicely, especially on Friday. Lagging indicator on the left-hand side, not doing too badly. Hasn't actually gone back above the previous high, but we actually got at least back above the Tenkan Sen being that blue line here in terms of the Ichimoku curve. So the Dow looking reasonable. The Russell, that was an interesting one because the Russell actually formed all-time highs again on the Friday. So that's actually leaning into a bit of extra strength, looking pretty good in terms of getting right back into the all-time highs, as well as really bouncing off quite nicely for short-term moving averages. And if you look on the left-hand side there as well, really going nicely with the lagging indicator. Now, this is where things get really interesting, though. Let's take a look when it comes to the SPY and the Qs. These are actually not having as much relative strength compared to, say, the Dow and the Russell. Now, remember, the Dow only has 30 stocks in its index. The Russell is the small caps index. So we're only talking about those smaller kind of companies. The SPY are the top 500 in the US. The Qs are all the tech-laden stocks. So in terms of all this talk about the SpaceX IPO and all of those other kind of things there, you would be expecting the bigger cap stocks to be really moving along. We didn't really see that all that much compared to, say, the Dow and the Russell. In terms of the SPY, we're only just trying to get ourselves back above the short-term moving averages. We didn't really get as much of a look in as much as what we saw with the Dow and the Russell. And you can really see that there on these short-term moving averages in terms of this particular index here. A bigger, more concerning factor is the fact we're really actually starting to see a bit more of a struggle in the short term, at least anyway, in terms of the Ichimoku curve on the left-hand side. It looks okay in terms of the lagging indicator. You're getting a higher high in terms of things there with the lagging indicator, but when it comes to this particular area here, we're actually now seeing this baseline catching up with the Tenkan Sen being the blue line. Now, this is where things get really interesting. If we actually have this Tenkan Sen being the blue line crossing below the baseline, that actually gives us an indication of a potentially short-term bearish indication. Be very, very mindful of that and keep an observation on that area there. We're still above the cloud, though. That's a positive indication. But we could be getting mixed signals in the SPY if we actually see that actually occur in terms of that blue line crossing below the red. So that's something to keep in mind. Let's have a look at the Qs. When it comes to the Qs, we've got the same situation going on. We've got decent situation going on with the lagging indicator at the present time, but we've got the Tenkan Sen and the baseline interacting in exactly the same situation. At the present time, though, the short-term moving averages are looking a-okay, so that's all right. But what could happen in terms of all of the tech-laden stocks and the top 500 stocks over the coming week? Anything's possible. If we start getting some more weakness, especially with some of the big tech stocks like Adobe, for instance, which is actually showing some relative weakness at this point in time, and a lot of the other tech-laden stocks as well, which aren't going all that strong, we could actually start seeing some of this pulling back and these indicators actually going to the negative. So be mindful. SpaceX, the biggest talk of the town. How did that actually go? If you listen to the media and you listen to everyone talking about it, everyone's saying, oh, massive surge, everything's fantastic. Oh, wow, everything went really, really well. Well, the IPO was $135. For all those wondering what IPO is all about, it's the initial product offering. Everyone was able to get an opportunity to get in there, be able to purchase stock at $135. And as you can see, it closed at $160 and everyone's thinking, wow, made an absolute fortune. This is absolutely wonderful. It got as high as $176.52 during the day. Okay, all looks fantastic in terms of the way things are going overall with that. Let's now have a look at what happened intraday. This is where things get really, really interesting. Now, I'm going to have a look and bring this back in terms of SpaceX itself, and we're going to have a look at this on a 5-minute chart. Then I want you to see whether or not you really think that this was really fantastic or not. This is something that a lot of people won't really talk about in terms of exactly what's going on with SpaceX itself. It started down here at $135 itself. Well, in terms of this particular chart, it's actually showing that it actually started even less than that. Well, actually a bit higher than that, about 150. But what actually happened was it went up to $176, about 52 cents, somewhere on those lines there, as you can see. Then, in the afternoon part of the session itself, which I'm actually going to change the timing on this back to New York so you can really see what happened, from about 1:10 in the afternoon onwards, that was basically it. The high, and then it went downwards and downwards and lower highs and lower lows from that point onwards. This green line here is the daily VWAP in this particular situation overall for that particular day. So overall, as soon as it actually went below this particular area in that day, the sellers were in control for the rest of that particular point from that point onwards for the rest of that day. And as you can see, it certainly was the case all the way through. Does this basically mean that this is the end for SpaceX and it's going to keep on going down for this point in time for the rest of its life? Not necessarily, but for the rest of the day, it definitely was the case overall. This area from this point onwards, from here, 4 o'clock onwards, was the post-market trading. So everything that actually happened from here onwards until around about 8 o'clock at night over in New York. So it actually recovered and went back above the VWAP at that stage there. But from here on in, basically, from this point, in terms of the intraday traders, in terms of the day traders themselves, they're actually losing money on average, is basically the best way of saying it. In terms of the day traders themselves, anyone who bought, especially those who actually bought up here at that point in time. So anyone who actually purchased into the IPO earlier in the time, in terms of say at 135 or so, were doing very, very well. Anyone who bought even down here at about 150 were doing very, very well. But anyone who actually didn't buy down here was actually doing quite poorly by the end of the day. Very, very interesting when you take a look at it. So I hope that actually brought a little bit of perspective in terms of what's been going on with SpaceX and what happens during the day, especially in terms of an IPO as well. We'll now move on to other sections of the market. So let's now take a look at Brent Crude. This is another area that Yash was actually looking at earlier in his presentation as well. And you can really see the decline that's happened recently here, especially as we actually went through the yearly VWAP. And that's actually basically just broken down right through an area that we were actually talking about in a couple of videos ago in terms of a potential support around about the $90.10 level from back on the 10th of March. We're actually testing that area right now as we speak. We were wondering whether or not the price was actually even going to get down to this particular level. It just has as of Friday. Whether or not we're actually going to see a test of this and a bounce off this area remains to be seen. Should we see a peace deal, like Yash was saying, through about the 30th to the 40th time, basically Donald Trump has basically said, we've got a deal on the table. Who knows whether that's actually going to happen. If all of a sudden this deal falls through, which, hey, let's face it, anything could potentially happen, especially with Israel still bombing Lebanon at this point in time, Iran is not going to like that. If that's the case and all of a sudden peace does not ring out over in the Middle East, we could see this actual potential support area actually come into effect, and we might actually see a bounce back up towards this VWAP. So anything really is possible. Should the good news actually ring out and we actually do see a peace deal come in, then expect this area where the volume profiles from back in 2023 come into effect and we start actually seeing these areas like Yash had mentioned in terms of the 200-day moving average and potentially even the 150-day moving average come into effect in terms of Brent crude. The same kind of situation would come into effect in terms of USO. However, do note there is a difference between Brent crude and USO in relation to the VWAP situation. In the previous chart in terms of Brent crude, we're below both VWAPs in terms of the quarterly VWAP being the purple line and the yearly VWAP being the green line. When it comes to USO, which is the chart on our screen right now, we're actually between both the quarterly VWAP being this purple line and the yearly VWAP being the green line. So at this point in time, we're still indecisive in relation to USO. So this is where the confusion is still running rampant in relation to oil itself. Uranium, on the other hand, is still extremely bearish at this point in time, even though we are actually appearing to be bouncing off the situation here down below in terms of a potential support line overall. I have to look back in terms of seeing whether or not there is a support line from a previous area overall. But at this point, it seems to be finding some form of support overall around about this $42 level. But either way, we are still well below short-term moving averages overall and well below the 200-day moving average as well. But no matter what, take a look over here at the lagging indicator, lower highs, lower lows at this stage. But what's going on in terms of volatility? And this is where things get extremely fascinating because overall, we were talking about the potential in terms of volatility actually clicking upwards in terms of things basically at the end of last week. You can really see that actually happening in terms of major rise there on Friday of last week. This is the last time I actually left it before I actually took a day off. And it really actually did continue to keep on going upwards. Actually reached as high as 23.3 to be exact, on Tuesday, only to come back fairly sharply throughout the rest of the week. Where we go from here will be all dependent in terms of geopolitical aspects. There'd be no doubt about that whatsoever. I was actually expecting more than anything to actually have a bit more volatility in relation to the way things were going to be working out, especially with things like SpaceX and so forth. Should we have more falls or anything like that in relation to some of these big tech stocks or anything like that in terms of any of the big major S&P 500 companies as well, or any retracements or anything, expect this to basically come back up and retest this 150 and 200-day moving averages as well. That'll be the big thing. How are we looking in terms of the bonds and the dollar? Well, the bonds have decided to get back in this particular range that we've always been talking about for quite a while. It's back above the September low, and that'll correspond in terms of the yields, in terms of actually coming back down as well. So they're back below the short-term moving averages as well. It's still fairly indecisive in relation to the lagging indicator there in terms of the yield. So that's quite interesting overall. The dollar itself, though, is actually remaining quite stubborn. It's actually remaining quite high at this point in time, even though we actually are forming some fairly lower highs, but, kind of like higher highs over here on the side here. So kind of interesting overall into the lagging indicator. We're actually still above the Tenkan Sen over here. So we've got some reasonable strength here in relation to the dollar. Gold and silver are actually starting to show some very interesting patterns, though, overall in the general scheme of things. Gold itself is actually still on a negative trajectory, well below short-term moving averages and well below the 200-day moving average. But silver actually showed something very interesting towards the end of the week. It actually regained itself back above the 200-day moving average, even though it's still below the short-term moving averages. So this one I think is going to be a very interesting play towards this coming week overall. Will it maintain itself above the 200-day moving average? And if it does, will it actually make its way back above the short-term moving averages? So a very interesting play that's coming along in relation to silver. And if it does, can it actually drag gold back up above everything as well too? So that pretty much covers everything for the week there, mate. Quite a lot that's going on. And really it's still a matter of, I think, a lot of geopolitical stuff that's going on at the moment. This is going to really be determining a lot of movement overall. So With that, mate, I'm going to hand it right back to you, and we'll wish everyone all the best for this upcoming trading week.
I agree with you more, Steve. Looks like things are looking a bit more brighter generally on the equities markets and even a little bit on crypto side too. But we just need a lot of follow through with the geopolitical aspect of things. And also, we do have to understand that Kevin Warsh is going to be speaking this particular Wednesday as well. And his stance, whether hawkish or dovish, is going to play a massive impact too. So be on the lookout for that. But on that, we want to thank you for joining along for this particular session. If you're still over here, please do drop us a comment. Today's comment word would be peace agreement. If you can just put that through, that would be great. We've been on the verge of a peace agreement for a very long time. And thank you so much, Mark, for your ongoing support. But if you like what we did today, please drop us a like. If there's anything we could do differently or better, please also drop us a comment. But otherwise, if you can subscribe and join us along for the journey, that will be great. But on that, thank you so much, and we will see you on the next one.
See you Wednesday.